When you think of obscure FNAF games, what comes to mind? Freddy in Space 2? Yeah, maybe. Security Breach Fury's Rage? That works too. But there are games that I'd say are even more obscure. Games that you might not have even seen before, and those are the troll games. These were released to both throw off the community and also build more hype around an upcoming release, and they actually came out quite often during the Click Team era. It's weird because I remember these games getting a lot of coverage when they first released, but nowadays, nobody talks about these things anymore. Doesn't help that the last one came out just before Ultimate Custom Night over 7 years ago, so they've largely been forgotten by the community, which I think is a shame. These are cool pieces of FNAF's history and deserve to be talked about more, which is why today I'm going to go over each one that was released, while also detailing the events surrounding them and how they work. The months leading up to FNAF 3's release were huge. Everyone was trying to figure out what this game could be about, and each teaser, along with the trailer, only added more fuel to people's discussions, as it was looking like it would be a drastic departure from everything the first two games built up. However, on February 15th, 2015, Scott made a post on Steam Greenlight informing the community that the game was cancelled. Yeah, supposedly he was hacked, with the hacker in question, LolsHacks, uploading the game early, allowing anyone to download the entire thing for free. Loading it up, and we're greeted with a title screen that's similar to the final game, albeit with a darker appearance and no title. The only button we're able to press here just states, New. New what? Clicking on the button doesn't actually start a new game, and instead brings us to this. If you couldn't tell, this is not FNAF 3. Instead, it's one of Scott's previous games called There Is No Pause Button. This is a 2D platformer where you're given the simple task of reaching the end of each stage, only you're constantly running, you only have the ability to jump, and of course, you can't pause the game. You play as Scott's character, Anim Dude, except his head is replaced with Freddy Fazbear's, making it impossible to deny that this is a FNAF game. I mean, come on, he's right there. Anyway, there's 30 stages to get through, which are all variations of two templates. One with a few rooms and an enemy you need to drop into lava with a switch, and one with a few rooms without the enemy. Now, you might think that means the game would remain pretty easy throughout. I mean, there's just 4 simple rooms per stage and you only have one button. How hard can it be? Well, just look at this. These stages are brutal. The later ones are like Super Mario Maker levels with the amount of BS being thrown at you. You've got extremely tight jumps, fake floors that are almost impossible to tell from normal ones, and fake gold trophies. You can't even trust the end of a level in this game. In the original version, there were 5 difficulty options that determine which obstacles appear and how many lives you have. Very easy, easy, and normal give you a generous 1000 lives, hard gives you a stricter but still manageable 100 lives, and very hard mode only gives you 50 lives to work with, on top of a load more obstacles to avoid. However, the FNAF 3 troll version of the game locks the difficulty on hard, which is kind of odd since you'd assume Scott would have set the difficulty to normal so new players can play through the game with the basic rules, but whatever. That's basically it for FNAF 3's troll game. It's nothing too crazy all things considered, but it was a pretty effective prank considering this is the first time Scott made anything like this for the series, so this caught the community way off guard back then. Fast forward to October of that year, just a month after the announcement of FNAF World. The game had an official website showcasing the main teaser, and this website received occasional updates, adding things such as new characters and music. That is until the 28th, when the website was hijacked, once again by LolsHacks. People were initially concerned until they realised that this was the same guy who quote-unquote leaked FNAF 3 8 months prior, which then made it obvious that this was another prank from Scott. I mean, it was pretty obvious anyway, like look at the way they type. What was this, 2010? Anyway, this hacker ended up releasing a supposed leaked build of the game later that day, titled FNAF World Halloween Edition. We're given the option to play as Freddy, Bonnie or Chica, or easy, normal or hard mode respectively, and then we're thrown right in. At first glance, this looks pretty similar to the final game on release, but it isn't FNAF World at all. It's actually a reskinned version of the RPG game Fighter Major Bard, released by Scott in 2014, and if you couldn't tell by the way, all of the troll games are just reskins of his earlier projects. To be fair though, it works pretty well here since Fighter Major Bard is really similar in style and gameplay to FNAF World, if not a little more primitive due to it originally being for mobile devices. All of the enemies have also been changed to be more in line with FNAF, but interestingly though, a lot of these redesigns actually did end up making it into the actual FNAF world, with the final boss, Purplegeist, being reused for the first phase of the Chica's Magic Rainbow fight. There's also 2 secret bosses in this game, Party Hat A and Party Hat B. who are actually references to enemies with the same name from Five Nights at Fuckboys, which is wild to me. You'd think that references to games featuring such lovely quotes like "Inhale my dong, Enragement Child" would be avoided in this franchise, but hey, I don't mind, I'm just shocked I didn't learn about this sooner. And that's pretty much all there is to FNAF World Halloween Edition. I know I didn't have much to say about it, but there's really not much to talk about. It's just a decent little RPG game with some fun FNAF styled sprites thrown in. Well, maybe the final boss is something of note, maybe a hidden message or teaser. Stuff like that is seen in the actual FNAF world, so let's have a look at what's been done here. Okay, moving on. Let's jump forward almost exactly a year to October 4th, 2016. FNAF's sister location is just days away from its projected release date, and Scott has posted a new announcement to Steam forums, that being, the game's been delayed. He says his reasoning is that he felt the story was too dark for his own liking, so he needed a few more months to rewrite it to make sure it's suitable for all players to enjoy, while also making sure it's actually scary at the same time. However, the post isn't all bleak. He also informed everyone that the original version of the story would still be released under the name FNAF Sister Location Mature Audiences. It was said to release in chapters, with each chapter correlating to a night. On paper, this sounds like a great way to not only hold fans over until the game's release, but also to satisfy fans that are disappointed the game isn't going to have some super dark and edgy storyline. Glad to see they've always been part of the fandom. But it also seems believable enough. There's no mention of any hackers, no jokes or irony, it all sounds genuine. Too bad it wasn't. Yeah, the next day when the first chapter released, it immediately became apparent that this is in fact not a dark, bone-chilling look into what Sister Location could have been, it's actually Sit and Survive. Released in May of 2014, Sit and Survive was Scott's final game before creating FNAF, and it's kind of easy to tell how close the two games were released to each other. Both games centre around managing your resources in order to survive as long as you can. Although they do differ slightly, since in FNAF you're prolonging the drain of a limited resource until the end of the night, while here you're able to replenish all of your resources infinitely if you play your cards right. At the same time though, the game is literally called Sit and Survive, let me have this point. I also find it funny how this was used for Sister Location's troll game when the main appeal of it comes from the fact that you don't sit in one place and actively move around the building. Anyway, Sit and Survive gives you the goal of surviving as long as you can out in the wilderness, now with the bonus Freddy head. Yeah, there's all sorts of danger out here, but Withered Bonnie ain't gonna be one of them, I'm telling you now. You spend the daytime buying food, drink, health items and defences, and those defences are applied during the night, where you're attacked by various threats. They start out pretty tame, with things such as flies, snakes and rain being your main concern, but it escalates pretty quickly, with later nights introducing zombies, ghosts, acid rain and meteor showers, among other things. Have you ever had a camping trip get ruined by the unflinching wrath of the universe? Your equipment also degrades after too much use, which can be an issue since they'll sometimes break during an attack from an enemy, leaving you wide open to the bulk of the damage. Pair that with the fact that you can't predict what threats you're going to face on any given night, and Sit and Survive becomes a pretty challenging strategy game. Well, at least until you experience all of the unique threats and know how to deal with them, to which surviving becomes incredibly easy. Yeah, new threats stop being added after around day 15, making that the goal if you're just playing to experience the content. You could also keep playing until you die, but honestly, the gameplay becomes very monotonous very fast once new events stop happening. But that's to be expected, this is a mobile game at its core, and an old one at that, so I can't fault it for having repetitive arcadey gameplay. And that's all there really is to say about Sister Location Mature Edition. Despite the fact that, like I mentioned, this is just a 2014 mobile game, I think it's really fun. Not only that, but I think this is one of the most believable troll entries in the series, even if the idea of a FNAF game having a mature edition is a little silly. Before I move on to the final troll game, I'm going to take a quick detour to talk about Pizzeria Simulator, because technically, this counts as a troll game. It wasn't advertised as FNAF 6 at all. In fact, a few months prior to release, Scott had announced that FNAF 6 was cancelled, so Pizzeria Sim was never expected to be a mainline release, just a simple tycoon management game. That means you could possibly make the argument that it's more in line with the other games I've run over today. Although, to be fair, Pizzeria Sim is a much more important entry than FNAF 3's troll game, but whatever. See it however you want to see it. Anyway, that brings us to the final troll game, which you could probably guess is for Ultimate Custom Night. This one didn't have much build up to it, honestly. It released 6 days before the final game and just seemed like it was going to be a small taste of what the game was going to offer. Keep in mind too, the first 4 games had demos, so it wasn't that bizarre for Ultimate Custom Night to have one too. Loading up the demo shows us the character roster. Yeah, no, there's nothing immediately wrong here, although there are some slight differences to this screen due to this being an earlier version. There's nothing too notable to go over since this build only predates the final release by a few days, so I won't talk your ear off about how the 5020 record time originally used 2 colons instead of a colon and a decimal, because that would probably be the 3rd time you've heard that fact. Anyway, as you may have come to expect at this point, this isn't actually the demo for Ultimate Custom Night, it's another one of Scott's old games. Since this is a final troll release, the game used here was, fittingly, his first ever one, titled Doofus. Yes, that's the actual name. Released way back in 1994, you control Doofus the dinosaur, now with a Freddy head, and shoot your way through stages filled with hordes of enemies, collecting coins along the way. Instead of keeping the enemies the same as the original game, or changing them to look a little more in line with FNAF, they've all just been replaced with images of different FNAF characters, which I find hilarious. There wasn't any attempt to incorporate them into whatever style this game has, and that's what makes them great. Like, yeah, I'm just straight up shooting babies. Wait, no. Now, I could spend 5 minutes delving into everything about this game, such as the obnoxious audio, MS Paint looking graphics, and the fact that you control everything with just a mouse, but like, come on, what's the point in that? It's an indie game from 1994, and it was made when Scott was 16. What were you doing around that age? I know what I was doing, writing this script. I think the context surrounding Doofus being used here is more interesting than the game itself. As I mentioned before, it's really cool to see that Scott's first published Click Team game was used to troll the community before the release of his final Click Team game. It feels like a nice send-off to this era of FNAF games. I'm not sure if that's what Scott was going for, but that's what I took from this. But yeah, that's pretty much everything there is to say about FNAF's troll games. Now, are these hidden gems of the franchise? No, not at all. Any impacts that they've had mainly came from the day they released. They helped stir the community's excitement for an upcoming game, but didn't really leave that much of a mark on the series. That said though, these are still really interesting and should be recognised more. It's a shame to see them constantly get skipped over in videos talking about the series' history, so hopefully this video helped bring just a little more attention to them. Speaking of which, I also want to give a thanks to this comment by Koshiloza for giving me the idea to do this. And with that, I'm going to close this video by asking for just one thing. Doofus 3D. Why aren't you returning my calls, Steel Wool? This is a good idea, just hear me out on this.